Supervisor Vargas, I believe we're live.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April 2nd Sandag Transportation Committee meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I will ask our clerk, Ms. Francesca Webb, to confirm that we have a quorum. Clerk?
Yes, Chair, we do have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I'd like to remind the members of the public on our process for both members and public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and we will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then I will recognize them. Now I'm going to ask our legal counsel, Ms. Amberlin, to provide a quick reminder on how the public comments will work. Please, Ms. Amberlin.
Thank you, Chair. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public may also provide live comments during the meeting. When public comments are called for on an item, please click on the raised hand icon in the Zoom toolbar, which is located on the top right of the screen. The clerk will then call on you by the name you have provided. If you're participating by telephone, please press *9, which will raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak. The clerk will then call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether they are emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Amberlin. All right, item number 1, public comments, communication, member comments. Under this agenda item, will be limited to 5 public speakers. Members of the public shall have the opportunity to address the Transportation Committee on any issue within the jurisdiction of Sandag that is not on this agenda. Public speakers are limited to 3 minutes or less per person. Committee members also may provide information and announcements under this agenda item. If the number of public comments under this agenda item exceeds 5, additional public comments will be taken at the end of the agenda. Subject to previous agenda items may not again be addressed under public comment. I'll ask members of the public who wish to offer public comment not related to a matter on today's agenda to please raise your hand at this time so we can call on you. There is one person. Mr. Gustavo Tallarda.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of quick announcements to make. The first one is related to safety. And recently, in a couple of meetings that have been, the Federal Highways Administration has shared that the data for 2020 shows that the number of fatalities on roads has actually increased compared to 2019 by about 13%. So this is troubling, particularly for the fact that we have had less traffic on our roads, but we have more people dying on our roads. And this is a reflection that people have been driving faster and that speed kills. So we all have to do everything that we can to try to revert that trend. And a couple of recent actions that were taken, one of them just last week at the California Transportation Commission, the commission approved a list submitted by Caltrans for improvements on 266 locations on local roads, totaling 227 million. When it comes to San Diego County, it included 16 locations throughout the county, including cities of Carlsbad, Chula Vista, El Cajon, Encinitas, Escondido, La Mesa, National City, Poway, San Marcos, and various locations as well as the county. Those were 16 locations where we approved pedestrian, bike, guardrail, signal improvements, and striping. These improvements totaling $12 million will increase the safety at those locations for all users, but particularly for our most vulnerable users that are bicyclists and pedestrians. The other issue that we did at Caltrans recently to address safety is release the use of a new crash dashboard. This dashboard will be accessible to everyone, but particularly to professionals that try to improve the safety of our roads. This dashboard includes data for the last 10 years on all of our California roads, and people can actually go into this dashboard and query the system for the severity of accidents, the nature of the accidents, challenge areas by jurisdiction, and also by time of day or the characteristics of the crashes. So it will definitely help safety professionals to be able to be more proactive in the design and of improvements that will increase safety. Another aspect of safety that is important to us is safety in construction zones. And April is the month where, unfortunately, we celebrate the lives of the people that were lost while working on California roadways. So this will be a statewide event happening virtually, of course, on April 29th. And it also not only remembers the Caltrans people that lost their life, but also the partners that we have, including law enforcement, as well as contractors. And it's good to remind everyone that since last July, we have lost 5 contractors throughout the state that were trying to improve our system for all of us. And 2 of those 5 were actually in San Diego County in late 2020. So to that extent, earlier in March, we actually held a summit with industry to try to identify how we can improve our construction zones and make the public more aware. The second announcement that I wanted to make was related to litter. You've probably all seen that we made some substantial gains on the condition of State Route 163 by closing portions of 163 throughout a couple of weekends in March. We have one more weekend that is going to be next week where we're going to close northbound 163. And we've been tackling particularly litter, but while we're removing litter on the closed road, we're also taking care of other items like some bridge work, some potholes, fixing some guardrail, and also some vegetation. And later this month on April, as we get closer to the Earth Day celebration, we will be moving to the next road that we'll be tackling on a weekend. It will be State Route 94 or portions of State Route 94. We will be similarly closing them and addressing various issues, including litter. And last but not least, I will mention the release of a survey that Caltrans and SANDAG are happy to partner with. This survey is going to be available to everyone throughout the month of April, and it's for the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan for North County. So anybody that travels in North County, particularly on roads like 76 or 78, or people that may be using the Sprinter, we welcome your input. Please go to keepsandiegomoving.com where you can access this survey. It's a very quick survey, and it asks you questions like, how is the system working for you? How can we make it better? And what kind of connections are you looking for? So we welcome all comments throughout this survey all the way up until April 30th. So again, the survey can be accessed at keepsandiegomoving.com. That concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members? All right, seeing none. Our next item is our Executive Director report. Mr. Hassan.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Vargas. Good morning to you. Good morning to you, committee members. First of all, I want to thank Supervisor, your chair, and the vice chair, Mr. Campillo, for visiting with us here at the Vigil Lab. That's what leaders do, just get a first-hand understanding of what's going on. So thank you both. And I want to thank the committee members for being engaged in this time, because this is a critical time for our country, for our region, for our state. A couple of items just to update you on Biden infrastructure plan. As you know, the Biden administration announced an infrastructure plan earlier this week. It's called the American Job Plan. It aligns exactly with the work we are doing here at SANDAG. Just like the principal in President Biden's plan, Sandag is planning for tomorrow's mobility system, focusing on equity, climate, and building the economy. And as I think we said earlier, these are the three pillars of whatever I think planning we're going to recommend to you to move forward for the region. We see a connection to many aspects of Sandag's work. This includes our priority project, Otay Mesa 2, port of entry. And this is the third border crossings that I hope if you haven't done that already, you should let us know so you can tour it and get an understanding of the scope of the work that's happening at the border. Second, the Central Mobility Hub that we're doing with our partners from the United States Navy. I have the honor yesterday of meeting the new Executive Director of Navy Southwest, Mr. Dennis Kick, who is a very impressive man, very committed to working with Sandag moving forward on the Central Mobility Hub. Let me just say that when we talk about Central Mobility Hub, we're talking about us becoming a world-class region, a region where we have rail connected to our airport, that we have places we will build housing, retail, and places where we look at future mobility and technology as a way into the future. So that's Central Mobility Hub. Garners a great support from our national, state, and local leaders. And then the Regional Transportation Plan, the 5 big moves. Before any talk of stimulus in Washington, we thought the future needed major investment in infrastructure. I believe we owe it to the next generations, our kids and grandkids, to make that investment. I believe we look for you as leader to make San Diegan's dream for the future much more realized and much better. For all those projects and more, we are ready to compete nationally. President Biden plan could ensure long-term investment on some of the region and nation's most significant projects. We have 120 projects ready to move forward in the next 18 months, worth about 1.9 billion. Let me remind you that these 5 mega projects that I mentioned, they are in the environmental and design stage. And we're going to work with our congressional delegation to figure out how we put these projects in the pipeline. However, this stimulus moves forward, we are positioned at Sandag on behalf of this 3.4 million San Diegans to compete and move our priorities forward. Delmar Bluff stabilization, and just to update you, following the serious collapse on February 28th, we'll continue to work with our partner NCTD on emergency repairs for the railroads. I'm happy to report to you last week, Transportation Commission allocated $10.5 million for that emergency repair. And for that, I'm grateful for the commissioners, the executive director of the commission, and I'm really grateful for my team because we're really getting good at getting Washington and Sacramento money here to the region. We continue to coordinate with NCTD, City of San Diego, state parks, Coastal Commission sheriffs to make sure and to ensure beachgoers are aware of the danger bluff collapse that it poses, the collapse poses. Rail traffic through the area is still at 10 miles per hour for freight, 15 miles per hour for passengers. And we anticipate to begin the work this month and continue through July. Let me just say what Supervisor Vargas and Mr. Campillo and I discussed. This is a corridor that's nationally significant. This is a corridor that's a lifeline when it comes to goods movement. And it doesn't matter where it's located, it's for the whole region. This is a corridor that the second busiest in the country after the Northeast. And this is a corridor that carries about $1 billion worth of goods every year. We cannot afford to have this corridor interrupted. We're gonna do with our partners all the repairs needed to make sure our commuters are safe, our goods are safe, but we are determined to move forward a recommendation for moving this bluff inland. And yes, you're gonna say it's too expensive and it's gonna take a long time. All of that is true. But that must be done for the region's sake, for the region economy. The studies we're doing is underway. You already gonna, if you haven't already at the committee hear it, you will hear as we move forward. Let me turn to State Route 11 Otay Mesa Port of Entry update. And as I told Supervisor Vargas, and I'm gonna rely on her leadership, we have partners in Mexico that we're working very closely with to make sure that both sides of the border move in the same direction at a coordinated time. Obviously, COVID-19 has impacted all of us and impacted Mexico also. And so we were hoping to get out of this stronger and better and move this project. Not only the CTC allocated funding for the bluff repair, but it also approved $42.5 million for the Otay Mesa Port of Entry, which is a joint Sandac-Caltrans project. That's 42.5 million from the TSIP, what we call it the Trade Corridor Enhanced Program. And this money will be used for site preparation and utility relocation. This project is geared to open September 2024. The next milestone for this project are financing, design, and beginning the construction of the proposed Otay Mesa Port of Entry. Let me just say, the potential for economic opportunities at the border is even not many people begin to comprehend. And it's the first time in our regional planning effort that our chief economists and chief data analysts were managed to figure out how to incorporate the border data into our planning efforts. That's really important. So watch out for Otay Mesa too, and we're hoping with President Biden's plan, because there is money allocated for port of entries, that this will be at the top of the list. The Go By Bike program update, just briefly, the CTC also gave us, we received $4.3 million in active transportation program grant funds for construction of the family-friendly Orange Avenue bikeway project in the North Park and mid-city areas of San Diego. So good news on receiving funding. What we're also doing internally, and our amazing finance team is continue to do work to minimize the cash flow issue that we're facing. Last week, our finance team successfully refinanced 2014 Series A bonds at lower interest rates, saving over $22 million for the region. At the same time, the bonds deal will help support the cash flow. It overall, so far in the last few months, our finance team managed to save $130 million of the Transnet Major Corridor program. That's finance team is led by our Business of the Week CFO, Andre Dujan. I couldn't say enough good things about this team. They come to the office every day. They work with limited resources, but they are saving hundreds of millions of dollars for the region. The Mid-Coast, very shortly, you're gonna see these beautiful red cars doing trial runs on an elevated structure. And later this year, a 1-seat ride from the border all the way to the University of California, San Diego. Biggest infrastructure project in San Diego's history, on budget, on time. Grateful for our engineers, planners. I happened to visit Balboa Station last couple of weeks. It's impressive. But I also want to remind you that we have 9 stations, and right now, pretty much 9 stations with parking lots. That's not the way it's supposed to be. They have supposed to be 9 stations with potential amazing opportunity for growth, housing, et cetera, et cetera. That's the way we plan for the future. And that's what we mean when we say mobility hubs. So look for great deal of planning there. Let me end here and just end with the saying, you're gonna hear today about the 5 big moves, the regional transportation plan. And you're gonna hear Colleen Clemison and Ray Major talk to you about the details of these plans. But I will say this, and in 30-year career, I think these 5 big moves for the San Diego region is gonna make history by being a nationwide, a statewide way of moving multimodal forward, by achieving social equity, by achieving a faster, clearer, and fairer system for our residents. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hassan, and thank you and your team for all the great work. I really appreciated having the opportunity to really assess a lot of this information along with Vice Chair Campillo. So I'm really looking forward to great work ahead. Are there any public comments at this time? Please raise your hand if you have any comments. All right, seeing none, are there any member comments? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. If a member would like to pull any items on the consent agenda, or if you have questions or comments on any of the consent items, please let me know. Okay, seeing none. We're going to go
Move the
ahead and,
consent agenda, Benelli.
thank you.
Second by Edson.
Thank you. Are there any public comments? I just want to double check, Ms. Webb, for the record.
No, Chair, there are no hands raised from the public.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Gil Cabrera.
Cabrera is an aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Montgomery Stepp, yes.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, yes.
Thank you. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Sankey, yes.
Thank you very much, and that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We are now going to move on to reports. Item number 6, first reading of proposed amendments to the Regional Transit Comprehensive Fare Ordinance. Transportation Committee is asked to conduct the first reading of amendments to the Comprehensive Fare Ordinance by reading the title and waiving full recitation of the ordinance for this and all future readings. This is the first of 2 readings for the ordinance amendments. The Transportation Committee will also be asked to approve the proposed amendments on April 16. Our board policy requires that all ordinances be read in full at the time of introduction and passage unless all members present unanimously vote to waive the full reading of the ordinance. Please note that the amended portions of the ordinance are included in your agenda materials. I will read the full title of the ordinance. San Diego Association of Governments Comprehensive Fare Ordinance and Ordinance establishing regional fare pricing schedule. May I have a motion to waive the full recitation of the ordinance?
So moved, Sankey.
So moved.
Okay, I have moved by Sankey and second by Mr. Cabrera. Okay, Ms. Francisco, for the roll call, please.
Thank you very much. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Gil Cabrera.
Cabrera is a yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
Thank you very much. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito's a yes. I was gonna note, I saw some public hands up. I wasn't sure if we were taking comment.
Not yet.
Sorry, I believe we'll take public comments after we waive the read or take the vote for the reading.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, yes.
Thank you. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Sankey, yes.
Thank you very much, and that does pass unanimously.
Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sandex staff for their presentation. I'm going to call on Mr. Brian Lane, and after the presentation, all the raised hands will be able to have a minute for be able to make their comments as well. Mr. Brian.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair and Transportation Committee, and also thank you for unanimously approving not to read the full ordinance. It's many pages long. You didn't want to hear it all, but it is in that attachment. I'm here to talk about our proposed fare changes to the Sandag Fare Ordinance. MTS and NCTD's boards have taken these items already and approved some recommendations that I'll discuss here in a little bit. We can jump to the next slide. So a little bit of history about why we are here. MTS and NCTD and Sandag have started on a program to switch from Compass to the new Pronto fare system. The Compass card system was purchased back in 2003, and it's getting old, and so we knew we needed to get a new system. We selected Init in 2018, and this new system is an account-based fare system with real-time communications, allowing us to do all sorts of new functions that we weren't capable to do with the Compass system. We'll be able to tack on other software type systems and anything else we want to do with any new technology that comes along much more easily with this system than we could with the Compass. There'll be a new Pronto mobile app and websites that'll be out over the summer, and then we'll be increasing that retail network for card purchases. And I took this item back in February to the Transportation Committee. We went into a lot of details about all this. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up again. So next slide. So we did some outreach to discuss the proposed fare changes. We started over a year ago to discuss ways to change the fares in getting ready for Pronto. Last fall started getting some fares, some proposals on the table, a bunch of alternatives. We went out to the public with those. We did virtual sessions. We did MTS and NCD had informational board meetings in January through March. The Transportation Committee, again, heard that item in February. Our Social Services Transportation Advisory Committee and our Social Equity Working Group both took a couple items each on this to hear about it. We got a lot of feedback over all these meetings. The participants were understanding what the best fare is. That's that new capability to ensure that we never charge more for a day pass or a monthly pass with this new system. They love that idea. They perceive it as positive. They understand that this, with these fares and some decreases in fares, there could be a funding gap, but they didn't want that funding gap to be filled by increasing any fares. And so we heard that far and wide from all the folks. We received letters from various stakeholders on this as well, and that's included in your attachment too, with all the other public comments, but asking us to think of new creative ways to not increase fares, and in the long term, look for ways to either reduce fares or find ways to subsidize fares for certain groups of riders. And so we've heard that, and that's where we're at today. Next slide, please. So some of the proposals on the table that MTS and NCTD's boards approved over the last month were absolutely no increases at this time, knowing that we're trying to rebound, getting out of COVID, out of this pandemic, and try to get ridership gains and not hurt the people who can barely afford transit today. We would implement the fare policy change to allow for best fare functionality. So in that ordinance, proposed ordinance attachment 1, you'll see best fare or best value referred to multiple times. We're also reducing the youth one-way fares to align with the senior disabled Medicare one-way fares across a couple different fares. So that'll be much more simpler and a lower fare for our youth riders. And then a new thing on the table that we might not have discussed in February, but MTS's board did get a letter from Circulate San Diego and got a lot of push on this, was trying to allow for free transfers with the one-way fare with the Pronto card. So within a 2-hour window of a first ride. So with this, you hop on your first bus maybe, and if you pay with your Pronto card, you essentially get 2 hours to board your other vehicles for that one-way fare. When you come home later that day, you'd maybe pay your one-way fare again, and the Pronto system would be smart enough to calculate all that and give you that best fare. But now riders who are just possibly taking a one-way trip during a day wouldn't have to pay for that transfer. And so that has a lot of our stakeholders and riders excited with this new part. So next slide. So our next steps, we're doing our first reading. That's all we're doing today. I'll come back in a couple of weeks to the Transportation Committee. We'll do a second reading. I'll bring the social equity Title VI analysis at that time. We can have further comments from the public. And then at that point, that allows MTS and NCTD to enact those fare changes 30 days after that, no earlier than May 16th. And they begin pilot testing the Pronto, rolling that out to the public. And the public will see a whole lot of outreach from MTS and NCTD and SANDAG as we begin to roll that out. We'll work with CBOs and other stakeholders to get word of Pronto and how it's going to work fully as we begin pilot testing and rolling that out this summer. With that, next slide, I'll take any questions and appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. I'm going to turn it over to the public members for comments, and then I'll head over to our members.
Thank you, Chair. We do have 6 people with their hands raised. First is going to be Michael Horgan, and that's going to be followed by somebody whose name is just San Diego 350. I apologize, I'm not sure, but you'll be next. Michael, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, my name is Michael Horgan. I support the changes in item number 6. Having this new fare system with fare capping and free transfers on one-way fares for 2 hours is going to be a game changer for those who rely on public transit. I also support lowering the youth one-way fares, as I think they should have been lowered the last time the fare structure was changed. I like the idea of the Youth Opportunity Pass, but concerned that SANDAG and other groups are leaving behind the SDM riders that are the most vulnerable and dependent on transit. I'm glad that SANDAG, MTS, and NCTD is listening to improve their systems to make them fair, equitable, and open for all. And also, why does Pronto not accept fare capping on Coaster? I was just wondering. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Next is San Diego 350, and that'll be followed by Randy Torres Van Vleck.
Good morning. I'm the representative from San Diego 350. I'm sorry that my name didn't show up. My name is B. Mittermiller, and I'm the Transportation Committee Chair at San Diego 350. Excuse me. Good morning, Chair Vargas and members of the committee. Our organization supports the proposed amendments to the Regional Transit Comprehensive Fare Ordinance. San Diego 350 supports the new Pronto fare system with its feature of fare capping, the reduction in youth one-way fares, and the free transfer proposal. We look forward to seeing the results of SANDAG's fare equity analysis at the next meeting. Keeping fares low for folks who depend on public transportation as their only mobility option is essential. Also, we would like to see our public agencies aim for a youth opportunity pass that would provide free transit for youth who are 24 years old and younger. These young people are the present and future transit riders of San Diego, whose futures depend on having equitable transportation access to schools, jobs, and services. I urge this committee to approve the proposed amendments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And next we'll have Randy Torres Van Vleck, who will be followed by Noah Harris.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, Transportation Committee members, Director Ikrata, staff, and members of the public. My name is Randy Torres Van Vleck, and I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at the City Heights Community Development Corporation. We're also co-founders of the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group and members of SANDAG's Social Equity Working Group. We're speaking in favor of the staff recommendation to approve changes to the regional fare policy. The recommendation before you calls for the Pronto fare system with best fare capabilities, reduction in youth one-way fares, and no cost transfers that last up to 2 hours with purchase. These fare changes are being made without increasing fare costs for riders. And this is going to make transit riding more affordable and easier to use for riders throughout our region. And we're happy to be here today to support these changes. A couple of scenarios that were considered earlier on in the process, I did call for fare increases. And fortunately, that is not on the table here this morning. I want to thank the MTS Board of Directors for striking the fare increases during their meeting on March 11th. And thank you to Sandag staff for incorporating those changes into the recommendation before you this morning. This is an exciting moment for our region, but we do believe there's more work ahead. We're hoping to see no cost fare scenarios included in the 5 big moves, including a scenario that calls for youth opportunity passes for those 24 and under. Thank you once again to staff for bringing this progressive, exciting fare change policy before us today. And this is such an exciting moment for our region. We're proud to be here, and we encourage you to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. And next is Noah Harris, who will be followed by Chris Sotomayor.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and committee members. This is Noah Harris with Climate Action Campaign, calling to applaud MTS, NCTD, and Sandag for today's recommendation for the Regional Comprehensive Fare Ordinance, which includes reducing the cost of youth fares, adding free transfers, providing best fare functionality, and halting any potential fare increases. We urge you to adopt these changes. Reducing the cost of youth fares and adding free transfers to the system are great policy changes towards building a more equitable and accessible transportation system for all, and is one step closer to achieving transportation justice in the region, all while increasing ridership and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Finally, I want to urge this board to work to ensure that youth opportunity passes are included in this year's regional transportation plan update. YOP is an essential investment in our youth that community members have been calling for a decade. YOP will increase access to education, activities, and employment for our youth, all while helping to build a cleaner, more sustainable transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. And next we have Chris Sotomayor, who will be followed by Carol.
Hey folks, good morning. Chris Sotomayor, they, them, AJ, Mid-City Can. I want to start off today by thanking you folks so much for this fare changes ordinance. We are so excited. This community is so excited. Our constituents, our community feels and knows that they are being heard, and that's not always the case for the working class and the oppressed. So we want to just really thank you folks. With that said, I, like the other folks present, want to highlight the importance of the inclusion of youth opportunity passes in this year's regional transportation plan, and that includes for folks up to the age of 24. We have heard a lot of rhetoric about youth opportunity passes and specifically about the transitional age youth population, folks 18 to 24. So you can imagine my surprise. When researching a lot of you folks, I learned that most of, if not the majority of you, run in a platform of being youth advocates and working with families and having all this experience. So this community has to assume that the refusal to include 18 to 24-year-olds in youth opportunity passes must simply be a case of misunderstanding. I know that us at Mid-City Can, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues really, really look forward to getting together with you folks in your offices and clarifying any possible misconceptions about that population. Again, thank you folks so much for your time, and you have a lovely day.
Thank you, Chris. Next is Carol, who will be followed by Michelle Krug, who will be our last public speaker.
Good morning. My name is Carolina with the Environmental Health Coalition and the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group. It is exciting to be here in a room where the staff is presenting a proposal that will not increase fares, particularly it will benefit environmental justice communities throughout the region. We ask that you support the staff proposal. And we see that this could be much in line with what we hope to see in the regional transportation plan, one that centers environmental justice communities, that ensures that our transit system serves existing transit riders who are environmental justice communities. That includes the Youth Opportunity Bus Pass and ensures that we have a vision that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and toxic air pollution, especially in environmental justice communities. And so we're excited to be here. We thank you. We thank the staff for all the work that has gone to make this proposal happen. And it's exciting. It's exciting to, as Chris mentioned, to see that our communities' voice are finally being heard in these rooms. So we ask that you support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Michelle Krug, and I apologize, we do have one more speaker after that. The name I see is Galaxy S9. So if you could just be ready after Michelle, you can go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am very much in support of the proposal. I have some additions or concerns. One is I would love to see the coaster added to being incorporated into this, if that is possible. That would make it much more of an inclusive system. My concerns in the disability community are the fact that they were looking at switching from the Compass to the Pronto card only in a 30-day period. I think that's too short. I know I have barely been out of my house since last March, and I know that it's going to take a little while for people to get out. I know they said that they would be giving out the free Pronto passes at the trolley stations for 1 month. I think they should be extended to at least 90 days. And my concern again is that there's outreach into the senior and the disabled community to make sure that they have a way of actually accessing that change. And then also using the computer system, things like that are going to be a challenge. So I just would like to see some thought into how to overcome those challenges. And again, I am in strong support. I do think the Pronto system will make it more affordable and accessible in the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our last speaker with the name Galaxy S9, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Maria Cortez, and I am a 49-year resident of City Heights. And I just want to say, OMG. And I also am with the City Heights Development Corporation and Mid-City CAN. OMG, I have been on this for 10 years for the Youth Opportunity Bus Passes. To see the youth get their one-way fares reduced, I just can't say the words. You're giving the opportunity, here I go getting emotional. You're giving the opportunity to the youth to go out and see what else is going on in other communities. You're giving them the opportunity to get to school on time. You're giving them the opportunity of seeing that there are other jobs that that is available to them. But not only that, you're giving them the opportunity to go out and ride the new trolley system that's going to be able to go to UTC. That's going to give a lot of opportunities for our youth. I am also thankful that there's going to be transfers at no cost and the future fare increases. I am very thankful about this. Thanks to Sandag, NTC, thanks to everybody and MTS, because this is what we have been fighting for many years. We shouldn't have to do this, but I want to say thank you to everybody. And not only that, but I also want to make sure that the 24 years and 18 are also included in the RTP because they are our future. Not only that, but for me as a senior, I want to echo the same thing as Michelle is saying, because it is hard for a lot of us that are seniors where I'm not technology savvy. And also for the people that can't see, I hope that there's a way that you can use the Braille system for them also and make it easy. But thank you so much. Thank you. And support the 5 big moves.
Thank you very much. And Chair, that does conclude our public commenters.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your heartfelt comments. We really appreciate it. Before I turn it over to our members, I do want to give a shout out to Rosa Olascuaga, who is one of my team members, who's been an activist on these issues since she was 14. I'm really proud to have her on my team, but she has been one of the champions on making sure that this is happening for our community. So I wanted to do that publicly and take that opportunity to do that. So thank you, Rosa, for all that you do for our communities. I did want to ask, yes, sir.
If I just may, first of all, thank you to MTS and NCTD for working with SANDAG. Your chairwoman, she's a bit modest with her staff, Rosa, but she made it very clear that she will hear nothing of what was originally talked about. Let me just say, this is just the beginning. What we discussed with your chairwoman, Supervisor Vargas, and Vice Chair Campillo is actually part of the 5 big moves. A recommendation is going to be to make youth and seniors free. And you know, my people say, well, wait a minute, this is just right. This is just right. And the reason I say this is really a small cost to give opportunities to our youth and our seniors to get around. But also, remember, we're building multi-billion-dollar systems that we want people to use. And finally, our board just adopted an equity statement. A statement is a statement. Unless it's followed by action, it will absolutely mean nothing. So I can assure you that your chair, I can speak for your chair in this case, the emotion is high here. This is just the beginning. Again, I want to thank both our transit agencies for working with us and implementing the new Pronto system that's going to make it better. But this is just the beginning of the discussion, I assure you. And if we're serious about social equity and social justice, we should be doing more as we move forward in the adoption of the regional transportation plan. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Hassan. And I also want to thank MTS and CTD for this great proposal and recommendations that we're moving forward today. I'm very pleased that our community voices were heard and uplifted in this ordinance. And I really do want to encourage a robust community engagement plan to help transition our communities to this new technology in MTS, NCTD, and SANDAG. I am very supportive of implementing the best fare functionality and allowing free transfers in a 2-hour window, reducing youth one-way fares to align the price with seniors and differently able folks. It's a great win for all of our frontline communities. Cutting youth one-way fares prices in half is a step closer to youth opportunity passes. I encourage SANDAG staff to consider ways to bring a proposal forward that encompasses youth opportunity passes, no-cost transit passes for our youth in our region to create a generation of new transit riders as we are developing a new vision for our regional transportation plan. Thank you to our community organizations for all the years of advocacy, their hard work. This fair ordinance recommendation will increase ridership across our system, and I'm pleased to support it. And so I am now going to turn it over to some of our committee members. I see some hands up. I'm going to turn it over to the clerk so she can call on you.
Thank you. I see a few hands up. First is Gil Cabrera.
Thank you, and thank you for all the public speakers. And I wanted to commend both our staff, our team, as well as MTS and North County Transit for this first step. I view it as a first step. I think this is a great move. In a prior life, I served as a judge overseeing the trials of infraction violations, and it was one of the most heartbreaking things I often had to do, and frankly, almost always exercised my jurisdiction, my discretion to wipe out any fines that were issued as a result because of the inflexibility of the prior system. So I think this is a good step in the right direction. I had a couple questions and a couple suggestions, just for what it's worth. I wasn't here, I'm a new committee member, so I wasn't here when the broader discussions were going forward. But a couple questions is, on the transition, if there's money on the Compass passes, will those be transferred to Pronto, or what's the circumstance with that? Is there any plan to move the readers for the cards onto the trains as opposed to on the platforms? Because that was always a friction point for a lot of people. And you know, having been lived in other cities with transit, it's often, you know, the train is really the point where you swipe on. And then finally, I'd certainly encourage the transit agencies with their inspectors to start to do everything they can to both give them the discretion and encourage them to, you know, provide warnings, allow people to get off the trains and buy their passes, anything they can do to try to avoid the infraction, because they seem like small things, but the fines end up being $140, $150 for a $2 missed fare. And that's just one of those things that we have to stop doing as a community. So thank you.
Thank you, Gil. Next will be Commissioner Benelli, followed by Councilmember Edson.
Thank you. I'm supportive of the staff recommendation to update the fare ordinance. I have a procedural question for our attorney. Most of the action we take as transportation committee members is subject to approval by the full Sandag board. Reading the staff report here, it looks like the buck stops with us. So next month, when we update, if we have approved this again next month, it rests with us. Is that true?
That's correct, Mr. Benelli. The second reading will be held next month, at which time the Transportation Committee will be asked to approve it. That power has been delegated to the Transportation Committee by the board. It is subject to the board's ratification, however. So the ordinance would not go into effect. I believe May 5th is the target date for the effect of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
And next is Councilmember Edson, who will be followed by Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Brian for the presentation and also all the speakers who came today to speak in support of this item. As an NCTD board member, I'm honored to have taken part in the collaborative efforts to develop the recommendations before us today. As we know, we're here because these changes require amendments to the comprehensive fare ordinance. Under the required scenario, fare studies that identified a potential annual loss of $346,000 to $567,000 in NCTD customer revenue, $324,000 to $559,000 being attributable to best fare implementation, and $8,000 to $22,000 to the implementation of youth fare reductions. So this loss in revenue due to implementing best fares is due to the risk that customers will not take sufficient trips to generate the equivalent revenue provided by the monthly pass, the current monthly pass. NCTD staff has evaluated its budget for the current fiscal year and for FY 2022. And we're confident that the budget can be balanced without increasing fares. That said, NCTD staff does not support future proposals that would further reduce customer revenue unless a new source of funding is identified and made immediately available to permanently fund the full costs of such proposals. The reason being that NCTD and MTS are subject to several performance requirements that are tied to funding. Key performance requirements focus on productivity and the most important fare box recovery ratio, and also expense management. So it's important to understand and consider the impacts of the decisions related to fare policy and how they impact TDA, LTF, and STA performance requirements. Transit agencies are currently seeking extended regulatory relief from TDA requirements due to impacts of COVID-19. I think we're all aware of that. It's been discussed here in the past. So absent temporary or permanent changes in law, if NCTD and MTS do not meet the TDA fare box recovery requirement, our agencies will be subject to certain penalties under CPU code sections. It's important to note that the use of state funding to reduce fares do not qualify as supplemental revenues for the purpose of meeting the TDA fare box recovery. So just wanted to remind folks that there are more moving parts in these decisions, and we need to make sure that the agencies are covered when it comes to increases and decreases in fares. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next will be Councilmember Montgomery Stetz, followed by Councilmember Santee.
Thank you very much. First, let me start by thanking Mr. Lane for the presentation. I also want to take this time to thank CEO Cooney and the entire MTS staff for doing not only the technical work with regard to this item, but having a strong outreach plan and then listening to community members and incorporating the feedback. Oftentimes we stop it, we'll do a robust outreach, but then won't, lack the creativity to find ways to incorporate feedback from members of our community who are now probably better experts than us at this point with the advocacy having gone so long for some of these items. So I really, truly want to thank MTS because this has, it has been not just something on a to-do list. It really, the staff has really dug in on this and worked with board members and community members to figure it out. And I think that moving forward, even, as Councilmember Edson stated, there are very real considerations that, we are required by law with regard to fare box recovery requirements through the Transit Development Act. We understand that, but I really believe that this is the time where we can figure it out so that we are promoting equity and transportation justice in our region. And so this is a time of all the bad things. I think this is also a time where we can put our heads together and get even more creative about how we can do it all. I think it's possible. And so with all of the requirements that we do have, we cannot forego those. But I think that we're at a place and a point in even our history where we can figure those things out and we can provide opportunity for our young people. And in that we can create future riders and we can meet the goals of our climate action plans that we have across our jurisdictions. We really, there is a cost to not providing what our community members need. There is also a long-term cost to that. And although we can't always evaluate those in numbers, we certainly see the effects of those things. And so I wanna thank the MTS board for really seeing that, allowing me to represent them on this board and express, the process that we went through. And some of the considerations that we came up with was that our youth riders shouldn't face the brunt of fare increases as our future ridership. And in addition, as we make our systems more affordable and accessible to our young people, we will build future transit riders. We also discussed the fact that we really need to begin to put our riders first, opposed to just the numbers that are before us. That we have to be people-centered as we make these decisions. And that as we come from recovery of a global pandemic, many of our dependent riders use the system to get to their essential jobs and have been some that have been most hardest hit by COVID-19. So with that, that's how we came up with what we have now. I am really excited about the time that we're in, understanding that we need to do a lot more. And last, I just was really interested in Mr. Cabrera's questions, and I don't know if he wanted answers to those or if they can provide answers, but I think, and some of them have been brought up at the board with regard to discretion of inspectors and things like that. But I don't know if anyone here can answer any of those questions.
Yeah, there's a question about the money for transitioning from the Compass to the Pronto system and how that money would work. So MTS is really going to reach out to the public, and there'll be a few months, 3-4 months of that transition period where they'll ask riders to move that money from Compass out over to Pronto or spend down their Compass funds. So there'll be a huge public outreach on all of that. In terms of the readers on the trains, I'll have to find out some more information on that. I believe they were looking into putting the tap type readers on the trains as well. I believe they are putting more readers on the platforms than there were with Compass, so that should be a lot easier for riders on the trains.
Okay, thank you, Brian. And you, my last point was just, I think that community-based organizations are super important in the outreach that we do, more to have it as a part of their portfolio in a real partnership that provides resources to them to get the word out to all of our different communities, to our senior community, to our disability community, to our young youth community. I think that this is an example of how we did the outreach with Pronto and ideas we got from the community and what we should incorporate. I really think that that should be a standard for how we move forward. There are just certain things in our boardrooms or virtual boardrooms that are not getting down to the people. And I think that community-based organizations are such a big part of that. With that, I've said a lot, so thank you very much for indulging me, and I'm glad to support this item today. And if there is a motion, great, I'll second. If not, then I'll move the fair ordinance if needed.
All right. Yes, well, I can go ahead and take it, but let me go ahead and turn it over to Hassan, and then we have two more people waiting from board members.
I appreciate the comments and the discussion, Council Member Edson and Montgomery. And let me just address one thing, and that's the fare box revenue. And I want to say this, yes, there is a fare box revenue criteria, and yes, you cannot use state funding to overcome it, but local funding can be used in some mechanism to figure that out. The fact that there is a fare box revenue requirement doesn't mean that's the end of the world. If you have, and I believe Supervisor Vargas and myself spoke about this, if you have noble goals to meet noble social equity and social justice goals, we will figure out with local revenues. I'm not talking about state revenues. I think the region should commit to this in the future. And you know, as I think we had this discussion when at the time Council President Georgette Gomez was a Sandag, when the first time 2 years ago we had a discussion of fare box revenues, and it was a painful discussion because everybody said, well, we have to do this, and otherwise we'll cut services. These are not the choices that should be in front of us. The choices that are in front of us is we attract more people to ride. We need to have the 80% of our riders who are low income and minorities to be able to afford getting to opportunities. And so I would welcome the discussion that both Council Edison and Council Member Montgomery spoke about, the fare box revenue discussion. I think our transit agencies are ready to tackle this, and shame on us if, as a region if we don't do that. So I don't want you to take that the fact that there is a fare box revenue requirement, that's the end of the world. And one last thing, even if you continue to charge fares, there is ways also to get back in a voucher format to the low income and minority and those people who could prove that they don't make enough money. So the bottom line is, I think youth and seniors, like the chair mentioned earlier, eventually is going to have to be part of the 5 big moves, and the region has to figure out a way with local resources how to deal with it, and we have to make changes to the fare box revenue ordinance, and this is not an impossible thing to do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm going to turn it over to the clerk for the last 3 more member comments.
Thank you, Chair. Next will be Councilmember Sankey, followed by Vice Chair Campillo.
Thanks very much, Clerk, and also Chair. And Monica, your remarks really go a long way to the change I've seen at MTS as a board member there. I really appreciate them. And I know as a member of this committee over several years, we have annually on an annual basis had to make that discussion of the fare box recovery determination, basically. And while the MTS has the basic financial backbone of the blue line, which is the mothership when it comes to our revenue stream. MTS has even had troubles keeping its numbers up, and I've watched that fare box recovery number go down over the years. And I know that we've had to make some pretty creative interpretations of the rules for our friends up north to keep them above that 20% category, that 20% fare box number. That and it's very refreshing to hear the perspective that Hassan just shared, that there's more than one way to skin that cat. In fact, it changed the remarks I was hoping to give and some notes I made earlier, because I absolutely agree with Jewel that we need to play inside the lines here. But if the lines are grayer than black and white, as Hassan suggests, then we have other opportunities to help different parts of our community that haven't achieved the attention they deserve. I want to go back to 2014 when I first attended a Sandag retreat up at Verona, and that's when I met Maria. And to hear her passion today and the emotion in her voice lets me realize that government can get it right sometimes. And in this instance, I believe the direction we're going is good. Gil, you talked about making a more compassionate, fair enforcement rules, and MTS has been moving in that direction entirely. And Councilman Montgomery, your remarks in the newspaper article about our new uniforms and about our new approach really went a long way to helping people understand the direction the agency is going. And I share with you sometimes what translates from the boardroom to the street level is sometimes gets lost, and your remarks were well said. Michael and Michelle Crew, you've been such an asset to our agency for so long. Keep up the good work. But your question you asked today made a lot of sense to me. On the coaster, will I be able to use my Pronto card to pay my coaster fare? And I know Brian Lane and I have been working diligently over several years about incorporating the ferry boat as less of a novelty in our transit system, but more as a part of our regional transit assets. And so as the Chula Vista and National City Bayfronts develop, that the need for that is going to become even more critical. We've worked with the Navy for many years on whether to reactivate that direct service to North Island. And as Coronado experiences 35,000 cars in and out of the bridge every day, the greenhouse gas necessity there to work on that problem is very clear. And when the Navy can park that many cars, when the Navy people are putting up with 2 and 3 hour commutes, if that's not enough pain, I don't know what is, to get the Navy to kind of become more of a partner with us in terms of using different access modes. And so my question for you, Brian, is we talked earlier about where those readers could be. Incorporating Pronto on the coaster would, I assume, incorporate some hardware somewhere along the line. And could that very same hardware be used in terms of accessing ferry service, whether it's from Broadway Pier to North Island or Chula Vista to downtown? Help me understand how the architecture of that would work.
So for the coaster is going to move to the Pronto system and get readers and be all part of that. What they're not going to do is be part of that best fare value system. And it's because of the complexities of the zone system with the coaster. It's such a long route that they charge, for one-way fares and monthly passes for 3 different zones. So it makes it a little complex, and then trying to do the fare capping by all that. They're also not going to be part of the free transfer from MTS trolleys or from Sprinter and Breezes to the coaster. You can transfer on a one-way fare on a coaster to Sprinter and Breeze, and we're hoping in the future to also include MTS services in that. So there are those complexities with coaster and the zones on getting that. Most coaster riders are already monthly pass riders when it's not pandemic times. So the fare capping is not a bigger problem with coaster as it is with the rest of the system, getting folks to jobs and to medical appointments and all that. So, and in terms of the ferry, right, you and I are talking, and we're hoping to reach out to Flagship soon and work with the MTS folks, the architects of the new Pronto system, and see what kind of technology we can get out to them. I think, with Pronto, anything's possible. They're already thinking of creative ways, working with Uber, Lyft, other companies to tack on with the Pronto system and make it part of it, whether it's having an actual hardware system component or just being software related. That ability to work with all these different types of new companies is sky's the limit with that.
Okay. And of course, we've got a new head of the Navy region on the civilian side, Dennis. I mistake his last name, but hearing Hassan talk about the professionalism and the working relationship, I'm hoping that we can get the Navy playing more of a role in our regional planning and really making a difference for our region, because they're such a huge part of our economy and such a necessary part for our nation. At the same time, we want them to be level players with us and helping in ways that will improve quality of life here for all of us in the San Diego region. With that said, I would second, assuming that Councilmember Montgomery's motion was a motion, I will second the motion for approval of the fair ordinance, move things along. And thank you for
Thank you.
putting up with my remarks.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Sankey. Just for clarification, there is no motion needed on this. This is an informational item, first reading. So we're taking all your information. We've had a really great, robust discussion. And I clarified that there is no motion to be taken at this time. Are there any other comments from board members, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have two more, Chair. Next will be Vice Chair Campillo, followed by Councilmember Edson.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair Vargas and staff for your presentation. Really just as someone who's used Compass Card numerous times, I really appreciate how much community feedback has gone into designing Pronto and making this into a much better user-friendly, citizen-friendly system that is intuitive and brings cost downs. And I really appreciate that we are not going to be increasing fares here. And I really want to echo the sentiment of the callers about youth passes. It's something that I've advocated for in numerous memos that I've written here in the city of San Diego for youth passes. Something that I think is incredibly important, and I hope we'll move to that with the proper amount of haste as we go into the future. Just do have two questions about this new system. First, in reviewing the documents, I'm noticing that there's a customer service center at retail outlets. I'm wondering what the costs that will be incurred to the transit agency for operating those service centers at outlets.
I don't know the exact details, but I believe there is there's like a credit card system that you set up as a business. There is a fee. So and they're still working a lot of those arrangements out with these retail outlets and trying to get one vendor who will be the one who works on that directly. But it's somewhere could be a 1% to 3% type fees. And so that is a cost that the transit agencies do have to bear as part of rolling out to so much more retail centers.
Understood. And is that looking like kiosks? It's not going to be storefronts, I imagine.
No, a lot of it'll be like a gift card that you can get off the same rack that you get your Target and Amazon gift card. So it'll be that you just take it to the cash register and they can implement it right there.
Okay, understood. Thank you so much. And then my last question is regarding the language accessibility for Pronto. Many of my constituents in District 7 here in San Diego speak only Vietnamese or Tagalog or Mandarin. How many languages do we think we're going to have, and what is there a potential rollout for that? Is there a timeline for that if we don't have as many languages as we see fit?
So Spanish is always our number one language that we translate. When we do our particular outreach or focused outreach, our public participation plans do identify those languages in those areas. So for an area like yours, Vietnamese, Tagalog, and others would be a priority to ensure that any marketing or public outreach is in those languages.
Understood. Okay, I really appreciate that, and just want to make sure that staff know that that's a high priority of mine, so that we can make sure that this great system we're rolling out, people are going to want to use it and be invited to use it even. So thank you very much, and I look forward to voting. Well, I would be voting yes if this was a motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And next is Councilmember Edson, and Chair Vargas, I believe this will be our last comment.
Thank you. Sorry to extend this any longer, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank Hassan for his comments recognizing the need for permanent change to fare box recovery requirements. And also, I liked hearing Councilmember Sankey's comments about also including routes through the Bay and by sea. As a frequent visitor to San Francisco and Vancouver, it's a way to move people in places that we aren't moving them right now. And I think that that's an important consideration. Also, again, I was honored to take part in this progressive efforts to develop the recommendations before us. And if I could second or third, I would, but we aren't voting, so I can't. So thanks, everyone. Good work.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your comments. And I think everybody is excited about the direction that we're heading, especially for our communities and the engagement of our outreach community organizations as well. So thank you, Hassan and team and everyone for leading us in this direction. I am now going to go ahead and go over to item number 7, which is our 2021 regional plan, moving forward from the vision to the plan. And I'm going to call on Ms. Colleen Clementson for the presentation.
I'll be with you in just a second.
I'll be with you in just a second.
Okay, start there.
Okay, no problem.
There we go. Good morning, Chair Vargas and Vice Chair Campino. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. We are really anxious to bring this committee up to speed on the big picture vision for the San Diego region. And the vision that's set forth in the 2021 regional plan is truly transformational. And it's about creating a system that is fair, it's resilient to change, and provides truly compelling options to driving. What we're bringing you today is really a compilation of several presentations that we've made to the Sandag Board of Directors since August. And we're going to start out by talking about what the process was to develop the big picture vision. Then we're going to go through the data-driven aspect of that. We're going to move forward then in talking about how we take that vision into a plan, and then what it would really take to bring it to reality. And one of the things that we have to do, the plan goes out to the year 2035, or excuse me, goes out to the year 2050, but 2035 is a really critical year because that is the year that we have to make sure that we're showing the state of California that we are meeting our climate goals. And so what I'm going to share with you today will be what we're looking at from the big picture, and then what we can see happening by the year 2035. And then we want to wrap that up with the discussion on the cost estimation. And as Hassan always says in his speaking points, this is going to be really expensive. We have to, by federal law, lay out a funding strategy that could make the plan a reality. And what Ray will go over with you in terms of the funding strategy is what we're proposing to put into the plan. Almost every one of the strategies would require future action, future studies. Some require legislative changes, some require voter approval. But we got to put something out there as a starting point, and Ray will do that. And then we'll wrap up with next steps. So we really appreciate this opportunity being here with you today. And I'm going to turn it over to Ray to go through the data-driven approach.
I can't tell you how excited I am that Hassan came to this agency and asked us to really rethink this plan from the ground up and to use data and analytics to really lay the foundation for what we were doing, so that we no longer were just doing things based on intuition, but that we were using math and information and data to really understand what would be the optimal solution for the San Diego region. And so that's something that I was really proud to work on over the last year. And what we would like to do today is to give you kind of just an overview of how we did that, especially for the new members who may not have seen these presentations in the past. And so I want to talk about just the overall bold new approach to planning in terms of what we do in terms of data. And so in the past, our planning cycles have really just been a refresh of the Transnet list of projects, if you think about it. Ever since we passed the ordinance, we had projects that we were working on. We would put those into the plan, and then we would fit lots of things around that, as much money as we had, and that would be the plan. So in other words, we were using data in the past to validate what we wanted to do. But this time around, what we're doing is we're using data to determine what we need to do. So it's from the complete ground up in terms of what it is. So we didn't hold ourselves to the constraint of any particular project. What we were looking at was what would be the best mix of strategies to solve the problems that we need to solve in the regional plan. And there are 3 challenges to the regional plan that we need to solve. And these are very complicated things to solve. And they require a lot of thought because they're interrelated. And so if you move one, the other one changes. But the 3 things or the goals that we were looking at was to reduce congestion, to be able to provide social equity in the plan, and also to meet the state and federal mandates and environmental mandates that we have when it comes to transportation in the region. So if you think about this holistically, we're trying to create a faster, fairer, cleaner system. And these 3 interrelated goals require really mathematics to figure out how we're going to achieve the optimal solution that maximizes all 3 of these things. It's important to remember that the plan needs to be founded, or we need to meet certain state legislation that has changed since our last plan. So these are much more rigorous in terms of what is expected of the plan. And so a lot of the changes that we made in terms of the system have to do with the fact that we have these goals that we now need to meet. If you think about it, the rules of the game have changed. And so what we have to do is change our playing pieces on the chessboard. And so when you take a look at cleaner, for instance, one of the goals that we have SB 375 and the Federal Clean Air Act. Both of those need to be taken into account when we're doing this. In terms of social justice, we have Title VI and other federal laws that we need to comply by. And then we have CEQA and SB 743, which really talk about reducing vehicle miles traveled. And that becomes the benchmark for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is really important because this is something that we didn't do in the past plans. In the past plans, VMT was not a measure. So we didn't need to reduce how much overall people were traveling. This time we need to do that. So that requires a different set of infrastructure to make it happen. But the big takeaway is this as we go through these slides. When it comes to cleaner, by 2035, we are required as a region to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 19% per person compared to the 2005 levels. That's what it mandates. We would love to exceed that. We're doing everything we can to set up a plan that in the future we'll do even more than that. But in order for us to get this plan passed so that we can continue to get state and federal money, we have got to get to the 19%. Some of the things that we took a look at were just as base data, is, the population and the race and ethnicity here in the San Diego region. So this graph shows the race and ethnic distribution in the San Diego region. And what you can see from this graph is that this is the first of the 3 disadvantaged communities that we were looking at. And if you take a look at the 2020 census, which isn't on this, but there were 56% of the population was non-Hispanic white. 16 years later, 46% of the population was non-Hispanic white. And as we move forward to 2050, you see that only 40% of the population here in the region will be non-Hispanic white. And so we move from being predominantly one race in the 2000 census to by 2050 being a very multicultural region. The second disadvantaged community that we are looking at are those people who have low incomes. And when you think about transportation is the second most costly thing to most households, other than their housing expenses. And so we know that low-income communities are overly burdened when it comes to the cost of transportation. But I just want to give you an example so that you can kind of see the information that we're working with. But if you consider for a moment buying a $10,000 car, which is not a very expensive used car, for a household that earns $30,000, okay, that's 22% of the low income of the households here in San Diego. It takes about 5 months of salary after sales tax to make that purchase. And it's a necessity for most people to be able to get to their jobs and even to get around here in the region. When you take a look at what that would cost for somebody who makes $100,000, it represents about 2 months of salary. If you wanted to fill a 20-gallon gas tank of that automobile, the person who earns $30,000 needs to work nearly 7 hours a day 7 hours, sorry. So almost a full day of work just to put gas in their vehicle. This compared to a person who earns $100,000 who probably needs around 2.5 hours to do the same thing. But as you can see it, this is a huge burden when you have to take basically 1/5 of your salary, weekly salary, to fill your gas tank once a week. This is something that we need to overcome in our system. When you think about it, from the highest level, you look at this low income families, take a look at the ones that earn between $30,000 and $45,000. That represents nearly 400,000 households in the San Diego region, or roughly about 1.1 million people in our region. When we look at the population distribution in the region, what we also see is that the San Diego region is getting older. And this graph, if you take a look at the blue lines, that represents the age distribution by 5-year age cohort from 0 to 5 all the way up to 85 and older. And the blue lines represent the 2016 data, and the purple lines represent what our population distribution looks like in 2050. And what you can see clearly here are those 3 pink lines at the end that are much higher. And so what that is, those are the baby boomers aging and not dying because of new advances in technology. Our community here in San Diego will look much more like a retirement community, something you might find in a place like Florida than what we have today. And so this is the population that really we are planning for here in the future. When we take a look at where people live and where we work, this is a very important component to how we use data to try to understand how people get around. The map on the left-hand side shows population density. This is where the San Diegans live. The darker the purple, the more San Diegans live there. And of course, this represents only the western 1/3 of our region. The blue areas in the middle are our employment centers. This is where 81% of the people work in the region. And so you see they're very concentrated in certain areas. And we use data, and for the first time ever, we were able to use data that came from cell phones to really try to track where people are coming from and going to. None of this information is personally identifiable. These are just numbers in a database that kind of help us understand how people move around. And so the map on the right here shows how we make those critical connections. But I want to show you some advances in the data science department, things that we were able to look at this time that we haven't been able to look at in the past. In the past, we used survey data. We still use survey data, but we would survey several thousand people in San Diego and ask them to keep a diary of how they move around the region. And what would happen is that we would take that data and then we would extrapolate that to the rest of the region. But now with cell phone data, what we can do is start to identify people who don't necessarily live in the San Diego region and how they move around. The map on the left-hand side shows the 34 million trips that are coming up across the border each and every year. We have the busiest border crossing in the Western Hemisphere at San Ysidro. And these trips are made into the San Diego region, and they're represented by the green lines, and that's data that we can now use. There are activity centers in San Diego. Pre-COVID, we had an amazing tourism industry with lots of people coming to San Diego and generating traffic, going from places like hotels to Balboa Park, or they might go to the beaches, or they would go to Mission Bay Park, for instance. And so we're now able to see how people travel to specific activity centers. And we have over 80 activity centers. This map only shows a couple of examples. And then finally, how the military moves around the San Diego region. And that was a really eye-opener for us to see how much traffic the military bases, including the ones in Coronado, generate. And so we're starting to be able to collect this type of information to make better decisions on how we're going to put our regional plan together. One of the things that we did in the preparation of the plan was to objectively take a look at the existing infrastructure and say, is it working for San Diegans? Do we have an alternative to the automobile? The map on the left-hand side shows one of the major employment centers, which is Sereno Valley. We picked a point just in the middle of Sereno Valley, and we looked at how far somebody could travel within 15 minutes and within 30 minutes. So that's represented by the green and the yellow polygon. And that's a relatively large area. We then did the same analysis throughout the region for different employment centers in terms of how long it would take you to go by an alternate form of transportation like public transportation. And what you can see is that you can barely get out of the employment center in 15 minutes. And in 30 minutes, you can basically get down Mira Mesa Boulevard. And so what this was telling us, not that there's anything wrong with the way that, with our alternate forms of transportation, but that there's a lot of work that we need to do in order to make it competitive with an automobile. And by making the public transportation system competitive with an automobile, we can get people to switch because they have a true alternative. And so we did this type of analysis, and we were able to have a lot of insights in terms of where we needed to do improvements. Let me just give you a little background, for instance, on what the analysis might have looked like for Sereno Valley. This is the Sereno Valley Employment Center in green. Those blue dots represent the employees in Sereno Valley. So there's 129,000 blue dots on that map. Each one on average, those people commute about 14.8 miles to get to their job. This employment center has the longest average commute. And we generate about 3.5 million vehicle miles traveled per day in this area. So if you think about Sereno Valley not as just a collection of buildings, but this entity or this living, breathing thing that actually sucks people into it every morning and then people go back home at night, that's what it's doing. It's creating VMT. And we have over 50 different employment centers that we looked at. Each one has a very unique pattern. Sereno Valley happens to have a lot of people from all over the region because it has some of the highest paying jobs in the region. So we look at that. But now we can start to formulate a strategy, which is there's 3.5 million VMT created by people going there. So now if we can figure out how to get people to that work site without necessarily being in their automobile, we can drastically reduce the VMT. When we looked at the infrastructure, meaning the highways and how people were using them, this graph shows the percentage of the automobiles that were headed to or destined to Sereno Valley on each one of these major corridors you can see on the left-hand side. But if you think about 5 North going into Sereno Valley, and this is basically bumper to bumper getting into Sereno Valley, half of the cars are trying to get into that green area. The other half of the cars are trying to get through the green area so that they can go north of that. And that's what causes that problem. So if we know where those people come from, and we know, like for instance, on the 5 and the 805, we can start to really figure out where to put a efficient public transportation system that can get people where they need to go. And there are more places that you need to go than just necessarily work, and those things are included also.
So a tremendous amount of data that we were able to bring together to really put together this big picture vision and bring it forward into a plan. And the way we did that was by applying 5 key strategies that you all have heard. The 5 big moves: complete corridors, transit leap, mobility hubs, flexible fleets, and the next operating system. And none of these 5 strategies can work in isolation. They all work together, and they make up for the shortcomings of one another and actually enhance one another. And this is what allows us to really, truly create a compelling transformational transportation system. When we talk about complete corridors, it's really thinking about our highway system and our roadway system and facilitating all modes of transportation: goods movement, dedicated lanes for transit, dedicated lanes for carpoolers, and making sure that we have curb space on our local streets and roads for drop off and pickup, and where we can get shared vehicles. All of that is considered in complete corridors and works because we apply an operating system that would help manage this, whether it's through pricing or providing real-time information about congestion and helping to provide alternative routes. So what can we expect by 2035 in the regional plan? As I mentioned at the beginning, the plan goes out to the year 2050. By 2035, we have in the plan that there will be a complete network on all of our major highways of managed lanes. We see right now on Interstate 15, that would be applied throughout our highway system by the year 2035. That would also include the technology that would help to manage congestion, to provide opportunities for goods movement to move freely, dedicated lanes for transit, and carpoolers. Goods movement is a key factor in our region's economy. And for that reason, there's specific things in terms of goods movement that we anticipate by the year 2035. That includes completing the third border crossing. That includes double tracking in the Losan corridor and applying management strategies on the highway system through the complete corridors. Also part of complete corridors are the rural roadways, and improvements in the rural roadways are all about safety and evacuation routes. So what that means is using technology so that we have real-time information about congestion, straightening curves, creating auxiliary lanes where we have large amounts of congestion or concerns where people maybe wouldn't be able to evacuate. And those are key important improvements we anticipate by the year 2035. So moving on to the second big move, Transit Leap. This is really where we provide that compelling option to driving, where transit becomes competitive with driving, meaning that we have a high-speed commuter rail network where rail is traveling at 80, 90, or 100 miles an hour. That's when it becomes competitive with driving. Dedicated lanes on our highways and dedicated lanes on the local roadways. And this includes not only the commuter rail, improvements to the light rail system, a rapid bus system, as well as local bus service. So by 2035, what we anticipate, if you look at this map, you see the green lines. The green lines show all the managed lanes that would be in place by the year 2035. And on the managed lanes would be the robust rapid bus service. So by 2035, a robust rapid bus service on all the managed lanes in the region. The purple on this figure shows the proposed commuter rail network. And here we're talking about above ground, above grade, below grade, a subway system, depending upon the topography, that really connects our major employment centers and our densest population centers. So that's looking out to the year 2050. The pink line here shows what we anticipate by 2035, the improvements in the Losan corridor. This is double tracking, moving the rail off the bluffs so that this is truly quick, fast, and all the improvements that we've envisioned for that time. And let me show you, there's that pink line. Okay, next will be the purple line improvement. So this is the rail line that really connects from National City to our major employment centers in Kearney Mesa and Sereno Mesa. And so this key link would also be completed by the year 2035. The third big move, mobility hubs. And these are really the centers of activity in our region where multiple transportation options are available. These are places that are destinations on their own today, but again, would be providing access to high-speed transit, access to shared rides, and really public gathering places. And these are the economic development opportunities, the opportunities for us to focus affordable housing, for jobs. And really, we envision probably close to 40 of these within the San Diego region. This is a map that shows, if you see the pink areas are the rough areas that we anticipate being the areas around mobility hubs, where we can really focus our future growth and development. And then when we apply this green area, this shows the reach of what we call the flexible fleet. So these are the smaller vehicles that can help us get to and from high-speed transit. And in the green areas are where we really see a concentration of the flexible fleets. One of the centerfolds of the mobility hub network is the central mobility hub, where multiple high-speed transit lines would come together, the commuter rail, the rapid bus, as well as having a concentration of flexible fleets with a direct connection to the San Diego International Airport. The fourth big move, flexible fleets, I've mentioned those. These are the smaller vehicles. They're shared, ultimately autonomous. These are electric vehicles, and we're talking about bikes, scooters, and shuttles. And these can get to the furthest reaches of the region and bring people into activity centers where there's access to high-speed transit. The regional plan is not just about transportation investments, it's also about the supporting land use. And as I mentioned, the strategy in the regional plan is to focus our future growth and development in those mobility hub areas. And in order to do that, the regional plan sets forth funding for grants to local jurisdictions to do the planning necessary to facilitate that, to provide incentives for affordable housing development. And we're doing that in partnership with the state. So by 2035, we would have multiple funding programs available to local jurisdictions so we can really leverage the transportation investments with the land use improvements. And this is what really comes together to help us meet our greenhouse gas targets. Active transportation, so improvements for biking and walking, critical to the success of the mobility hubs, critical for ways for us to get around our communities and feel safe. And safety is at the core here when we talk about active transportation. That's the Vision Zero, access to e-bikes. These are ways that we can get around our communities that are cleaner and fun. The regional plan also is proposing investments in zero emission vehicles. This is everything from getting our bus fleet, all of our public vehicles so that they are electric, adding infrastructure, so charging systems throughout the region for private vehicles as well as fleet vehicles, and doing that by the year 2035. The fifth big move, this is the operating system. This is the technology that really brings this whole plan together. And on Friday, April 9th, so a week from today, we'll be doing an in-depth discussion on the next operating system with the board of directors. And we will bring that presentation back to you in early May. But this is really key. This is the next operating system. The technology is the big game changer in transportation. Other supporting programs are really important. So there's the infrastructure, there's the land use, but also providing incentives for employers for incentives for telecommuting. We've all seen how that's worked so far during COVID. But other incentive programs for employers, as well as a pricing system that really helps to influence behavior in ways that reduces greenhouse gas emissions and helps manage congestion. So this is the bold new vision. This is obviously a satellite image of the San Diego region. So looking out to the year 2050, this is what we can expect. So the dark green here shows the complete corridor. So a fully connected managed lane system in the San Diego region. Improvements on the rural roadways for safety and evacuation routes. A high-speed commuter rail line in the densest areas to get people from home to jobs. And this is super important when it comes to equity as well. Some of the highest paying jobs, as Ray mentioned, are up in the Sereno Valley area, and how we provide an affordable transportation option for people to get to the higher paying jobs in Kearney Mesa and in Sereno Valley. Next, improvements to speed up our light rail and the Sprinter, so the trolley and Sprinter, a network of mobility hubs, and then connecting all of this with the next operating system. So now we've put all of this into our transportation model, and we have some preliminary results.
So Colleen talked a lot about what is going to happen potentially in the next 14 years out to 2035. A lot of the work that we do, though, for the regional plan goes all the way out to 2050. So I will be presenting kind of a mixed set of information for both 2035 and for 2050. One of the first things that we did once we figured out how we wanted to implement the 5 big moves is to take all of that information and data and put it into a series of transportation models that are known as the activity-based model, or ABM. And you probably may have heard that acronym, but that's a very sophisticated transportation model that helps us analyze how things will change if we build this type of infrastructure. So if we take a look at the base data, which is the 2016 information, what we can see is that about 80% of San Diegans drove alone when they went to work in 2016. About 13% of the people carpooled, 3% used transit, and another 3% either biked or walked to work. And by comparison, just keep this in mind, the 2015 plan was able to reduce that drive alone percentage from 80% down to about 75% by 2050. So that was the 2015 regional plan. But by applying the 5 big moves, which is a completely different strategy to solving this problem, what we see is that we can lower the drive at home percentage to 62%. We can reduce in the process the number of trips that are driven alone by over 100,000 trips per day by 2035. You also see that carpooling increases to 17%, and there's a 3-fold increase in transit usage, primarily due to better accessibility, more frequent service, and really targeting the optimal origins and destinations of where a system needs to go. And you also see that there's an increase in active network because it'll be built out by 2035. By 2050, these improvements continue to pay their benefits to the region, and you see that the drive alone percentage is now down to 56%, with increases in carpooling and increases in transit and also bike and walk. So we were very excited when we started to see this information. Part of the reason that that we're able to do this is that what we're doing is we're tying together the areas that people go to with the areas where they live. So we're looking at those as 2 completely separate pieces of information. So we're looking at how people travel from these things, and we create this system that really connects all of these together. And like I said earlier, we also take into account what people do during their regular day when they're not necessarily going to an employment center. So if they're going to the grocery store, they're going to the library or childcare or whatever, and that's where a lot of the flexible fleets and mobility hubs come into play. And you can see this as we layer over some of the data. Now, when we take a look at transit in terms of social equity, so when we look at this, we look at within a half mile of a commuter rail stop, light rail stop, or transit stop. This is where somebody could actually, walk over to the area. One of the shortcomings of our system, if you take a look at the 2016 data, is that about 9% of the regional population can even have access to transit. And this is why you see the map that I showed you earlier of Sorrento Valley, why we really we can't get people where they need to go. About 12% of the low-income population, 10% of the minority population, and 8% of the senior population lives within a half mile of an alternative form of transportation to driving. But once we put in these complete corridors and we start to implement the transit lead strategy, by the time 2035 rolls around, so this is just 14 years from now, really, when you look at this plan, look at the increases that we'll see. About a third of the region will have access to some alternate form of transportation. Low-income populations, nearly 38% will have access. Minority populations, 34%, and the senior population, 32%. These type of numbers really start to show the advantage of the 5 big moves and how what we're doing is really giving people an alternative to the automobile. And this is why we're starting to see a reduction in the single occupancy vehicle trips in the data that I presented earlier. By 2050, this continues to pay dividends, and you can see that even more of our population has access. Now, a lot of people have a problem getting to work. And that's another shortcoming of our current transportation system. Some of the longest commutes that San Diegans are making are to get to their jobs. And in some cases, people are spending as much as 2 hours each way to get from their place of residence to their work. So we really need to be able to get people to these high-paying jobs. This transportation system, I'm not sure we covered it, but it not only does it tie the employment centers with where the population centers are, it ties the border community with all of the universities, and all the universities are connected also with light rail, with the trolley once we finish the mid coast. And so now you've got this system where we can get kids to their educational centers where they need to be, and we have also public transportation to get people to these high-paying jobs from their homes. But so if you look at Tier 1 employment centers, so these are some of the highest paying jobs in San Diego, and we're looking at areas here that employ probably around 22% of the total population. Within 30 minutes, right now, of about 16% of low-income people can get to their jobs within 16 minutes, and about 13% of the minority population. And within 45 minutes, you see the figures over there. It's 35% and 32%. But what happens by 2035? What starts to happen is that within 45 minutes, about 51% of low-income households can now get to these job centers, about 46% of the minority populations. By 2050, those numbers continue to increase. Now, not everybody works in one of the major employment centers. These are the Tier 2 employment centers. And here are the statistics for the Tier 2, and I'll let you just take those in for a moment, of the percentage of the population who can get to their jobs right now using an alternative form of transportation. By 2035, you see that 78% of the low-income population will be able to get to their Tier 2 job centers within 45 minutes, and about 73% of minority populations. And take a look at the numbers for 2050 as the plan continues to get built out. This is really a transformational and amazing increase in the ability of San Diegans to move around between where they live and where they really need to be to be economically successful within the San Diego region. And so now I'd like to talk a little bit about the cost estimates and the funding strategies. And as Colleen mentioned, these are required by the federal government as part of the plan. And as Hassan has said many, many times, this plan is going to cost a lot of money. And yes, he's absolutely right. It's going to cost a lot of money, but every single plan that we've ever proposed cost a lot of money. The 2015 regional plan, and these are all in 2020 dollars, so complete apples to apples comparisons. The 2015 regional plan, which was adopted by the Sandag Board of Directors, was a $130 billion plan. This 2021 regional plan, which we are proposing and taking to the Board of Directors in the next couple of months, will be a $163 billion plan, where you can see this is $14 billion less than what we reported in August. We had originally said it was 177 billion. And the reason is that as we started to do more of the modeling, we found that there was a large rail segment that really didn't meet the criteria we were looking for. So we were able to eliminate that cost from the plan, and we were able to reduce the footprint of some of the managed lanes. And so that made the plan more cost effective. So again, the overall numbers are there on the screen. And when you compare the two plans and you really look at where is the difference, we see that there's about 38% of the money went to capital costs in the 2015 plan, which is about $63.7 billion, compared to $87.7 billion in the 2021 plan. So more capital investments. And that also includes the new high-speed commuter rail and a fully managed lane system. And additionally, there's about a 20% increase in operation expenditures to support a larger transit fleet and a managed lane system. You'll also see that there's a little bit of an increase. There's a 50% increase in things like commuter incentives, active transportation, affordable housing, and mobility hub development. So that's represented in the light blue, or sorry, in the green area under programs. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the cost. And one of the things that Hassan has absolutely instilled in us is that we want to be 100% transparent with you, the board, or the transportation board, the board of directors, and also with the public in terms of what we're doing, the numbers we're looking at, and what things are going to cost. And so we are putting the numbers out there completely so that people can see exactly how this is happening. Now, there's a lot more detail to this. If anyone's interested, we can sit with you on the side and get into what's in each one of these. But this shows you the distribution of the costs in the 2015 plan. And as you can see, transit operations was the largest category at 27.6 billion, followed by managed lanes and regional roadways, which was about 26.7 billion. And you can see how we did the distribution of cost. Comparing that to the 2021 plan, you see there are some significant differences. And the one that really sticks out is the investment in transit capital, which goes from 25.9 billion to 55.5 billion. And these are those infrastructure improvements that we need to do in order to be able to have that alternative to the automobile that we've been talking about. What you'll also see here is that there's a significant increase from 10 billion to 18.6 billion in freeway operations and maintenance. And then there's also some new categories of expenditures, about $4.8 billion for transit fare subsidies. This is for the youth and low income populations, about $5 billion for mobility hubs and flexible fleets, and about $200 million to start working on that next operating system that Colleen talked about. Now, this is the revenue side of the equation. So first we looked at the cost, now we look at the revenue. In the 2015 plan, this is what we believed our sources of funding needed to be. Now, remember, we have to submit a plan each year in terms of what the potential revenue sources are. This is what we submitted in 2015, largest category, about 34.4 billion was going to come from state formula grants. And then you see federal grants. So state, federal were the biggest contributors, followed by Transnet. You see that there's 18.2 billion in that plan that was supposed to come from the Transnet sales tax measure. These green bars represent the funding the revenue assumptions for the 2021 regional plan. You can see that we still believe that the same amount of money will be coming from state and federal grants. But you see that once we fix the forecast error that I know everybody knows about, that reduced the Transnet revenue in 2020 dollars. This is what we would be collecting from now until the end of the program, from 18.2 to 10.6 billion dollars. So this needs to be made up. And if you take a look at some of these other categories, for instance, you see that we have a future local sales tax that is calculated into this. We have a future federal fuel tax that's calculated into this. Managed lane tolls are calculated into this. And also a future federal road user charge, which is also known as a VMT fee. So you see those things are now in our plan. But what I want to point out also is that a lot of these things were in the 2015 plan, there's more allocated to it in terms of funding this time around. So what this table provides is really information. Oh, hold on, what happened there? Hold on there.
We've seen somebody else's notes.
Yeah.
All the files, right? Now we know where to keep all that data.
Hold on, we got technical support here. So. But yeah, I'll just keep talking about it because you can kind of see the graph on the edge. But what this takes a look at in the 2015 plan, we had assumed that we would have a 1/4 cent sales tax adopted sometime in the future. And we estimated that we would generate about $7 billion from that. In the 2021 plan, we're assuming that we will have a future local sales tax of around 1/2 cent, and also a future MTS service area sales tax of around 1/2 cent. So that would generate $11 billion and $7 billion respectively. There's also an assumption of a new proposed fee on transportation network company fees. So these are the Ubers and the Lyft. Uber and Lyft actually create a lot of VMT. And so this fee would be placed on them, generating approximately $2 billion in future revenue. Also, road user charges, or the VMT fee, we had proposed, or we had planned for in the last regional plan, that there would be a state usage charge of about 2 cents per mile, and that would have generated about $7 billion. The new calculations that we're using for the regional plan included 2 cent per mile local fee and a 2 cent per mile state fee, generating $16 billion each. And these fees are necessary to help really start to change behavior and to make people look at other alternatives. And so this is one of the ways that this is one of the mechanisms we use to get VMT to be reduced to meet our state mandate. Also, the state housing revenue for transportation, SB 795, would be bringing in about $4 billion. And then network of managed lanes and pricing those. And this is where one of the largest increases would be going from about $1 billion to $13 billion. In the 2015 plan, we had $8 billion in there for California high-speed rail, but it's been pulled out of the local plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Colleen.
Wrap up.
To wrap up.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to point out that Ray mentioned in the cost estimates, it's relevant to the last item you had on the agenda, and that is with respect to transit fares. So by the year 2035, we have in the plan to have free transit for low income and free transit for youth. That's laid out in the plan. So just to wrap up, James, my slides aren't advancing. Okay. If you didn't hear enough today, we have more for you. So as I mentioned on Friday, April 9th, we will be going to the board of directors with a detailed discussion on technology and the role of technology in the plan, the expectations, what will be needed to make it all work. And then we want to bring that back to you here at the Transportation Committee. So this lays out our next steps. This is really leading up to us releasing the draft plan in May. So we've done today to bring you up to speed to kind of where we are with the board of directors. On April 23rd, we'll be talking about social equity and the social equity framework for the regional plan and how that will transcend into everything that we do at Sandag going forward. Then we will be talking about how the state and regional plan and local plans all come together to maximize greenhouse gas reductions, how the regional plan can help you all meet the climate goals in your climate action plans. On May 7th, we talked with your chair about this to do a joint meeting with the Regional Planning Committee and along with the Borders Committee to do the same discussion, important discussion on social equity, as well as share some results with you on what's coming out of a telecommute survey in light of what we've learned in COVID. And then we'll come back here to you all to do the detailed discussion on technology in the regional plan on May 21st. And then on May 28th, the regional plan will be released for public review, and we anticipate several further discussions with the Transportation Committee to help us get the word out about this really important planning effort. So once we release the draft plan, we will then release the draft environmental impact report in the summer, and the plan and EIR will be before the board of directors this fall. So we really appreciate your time today. We hope we got you excited about what the future holds. We know this is an amazing group of people who can help make this plan a reality, and we're excited to work on that with you. So I'll turn that back to the chair.
Chair,
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Chair, if I just may, I think, first of all, Colleen and Ray, they're amazing people, and I'm really proud of them. And I hope you would agree with me that, I tried to give their presentation, but I did a miserable job. So I think they're just amazing. So let me just a couple of things that Colleen and Ray said that I really want the committee to hold us to and remind us all.
His video.
And let me just say that on the revenue side, we got into trouble as an agency. We got into trouble as an agency when we forecasted the last sales tax. And Ray Major got us out of that trouble by coming out and saying, well, look, we forecasted an amount and everybody says, oh my God, we're gonna build all these projects. But it so happened that what we forecasted was 2 times as high as what we ended up. Moving forward, it's about transparency. We sent you many gigabytes of data, and I hope you all received it. And if you didn't, let us know. Because we want to be transparent. We want to be honest. We want to be straightforward. There is absolutely nothing to hide here. Every single thing we do, every numbers we showed you today is backed by data and analysis. We created a whole new area of big data and data analytics. Ray is the chief officer for data analytics. We created a whole area of quality control. I want to assure you as leaders, and I want you to assure the public that all you're going to see from us is maybe difficult to see, but an honest discussion. And I want you to hold us to that. I think it is so important to get the public trust and your trust that we're not showing you numbers just to make things look better than it is. We're going to have difficult discussions, as we told your chairwoman and vice chair, but it's an important discussion to have. So with that, I think Colleen, Ray, and myself are ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and ask public members. I think we have one public member, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Carolina, are you ready? You can go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. This is Carolina with the Environmental Health Coalition. We want to thank the staff for working so diligently in collecting all this data. We really support all the science behind the regional transportation plan. It's what we need to see. But we are here to ask that the way we provide information needs to be more accessible to the public, especially to environmental justice communities. We also want to ask about the phasing of these projects, in particular to environmental justice communities. So, let me focus on the ask about making accessible information. It is very unclear to us up to this point, what are the projects that are going to be of benefit to environmental justice communities? And we need to see that clearly laid out. We appreciate all the data and we need to see that, all those reports, but the way the information is being presented doesn't make it very accessible. And it feels as if we have to dig into thousands and thousands of pages and like do the math by ourselves for us to identify how is this plan going to benefit environmental justice communities. The other thing is the phasing component. We realize that this is a long-term vision, but the climate chaos is here. And we faced it, especially as a region last summer with the heat waves. Those are going to increase. And by 2035, we'll be in a very difficult condition. So our communities, especially environmental justice communities that have been disconnected to job opportunities, they cannot wait till 2035. We need to see a plan. Yes, those big infrastructure projects need to happen and we support them. But we need to see a plan that benefits environmental justice communities in the next 5 years. And we realize that this is a long-term plan, but for our communities to be behind the regional transportation plan, we need to see something that says they're going to connect to jobs next year, in the next 2 years, because not only the pandemic hit them hard, but also it's the reality. It's been what's been happening for decades. So we can't wait till 2035. We need to see an action plan for the next 5 years, specifically to benefit environmental justice communities. And once again, I wanna highlight all the work that has gone behind this. We really appreciate the thoroughness. we realize that we're in a transition period with Sandag, and we're seeing it, we're witnessing with the fare decreases. So we hope to see that line of thought continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public commenters.
Thank you so much. Thank you both Ray and Colleen for all this information and for sharing this. I really, I had the privilege of being there in person to have a conversation with you and ask a lot of questions. So I'm going to turn it over in a second to my colleagues. But I do want to emphasize that I think that for too long we have underinvested in transit in our region, and we have left our transit-dependent communities behind. I really appreciate this plan. Moving forward, we'll bring mobility hubs, complete corridors, and advanced high-speed rail. As I was reviewing all of this, I think what I see, and I really appreciate Carolina's comments, that we have to make sure we're looking at this from an environmental justice perspective. And I want to emphasize that, it's a new day. I think it's a new day at Sandag. It's a new day in our County Board of Supervisors and in our council, where we're going to be asking these tough questions to make sure that our communities are at the forefront and the front line. And so we will be looking into this as well. But I do believe that it behooves us to invest in a holistic transportation system that benefits all people. It prioritizes mobility needs with clean transportation options. And really, I think for me, it's been really about this concept of healthier and stronger communities, and the high mobility adoption reduces air pollution and creates economic opportunities. I think it incorporates the other part that I thought was really, that I think is very unique to this model, is that it really incorporates the interdependence with our binational region, which I think we've missed that piece before. And the fact that it's data-driven and focuses on climate goals is a great start to this work that we're doing. And so I just want to say thank you again for all the information. We'll keep asking a lot of tough questions. I think that's our responsibility to hold everyone accountable. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to the clerk to see if there are any comments from my colleagues.
Thank you, Chair. First, I see Councilmember Montgomery steps, followed by Councilmember Zito.
Thank you very much. And also want to echo the chair's comments. Thank you for those comments. Thank you, Colleen and Ray, your tireless work, the entire Sandag staff. Also just want to highlight our director's commitment to equitable access for all with regard to transportation. I think that it's continuing to be reflected in what we see. And I also appreciate the analysis around people of color, low income, and seniors accessing transit within a half mile of where they live, and how that really has an impact on economic opportunities as they are provided throughout our region, but sometimes are not accessible to the people who most need them. So thank you for including that in the analysis. I am a big supporter of the 5 big moves. I know we still have a lot of details to get through, and understand that there will be continued robust discussion around that, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity to reverse historic inequities when it comes to transportation and transit. Just a couple of quick questions. One is more of a data question. The other is focusing on having economic opportunity throughout this process and throughout the building, including the mobility hubs that Colleen spoke specifically about as economic opportunity spaces. With regard to the data, and this is specifically on slides 11 and 12 with the cell phone data, I saw there, and also in the report, is it correct that that data is coming from May 2019? Is that, or up to May 2019?
Probably. It's a sample of data. So we don't have a real-time data feed yet. These are the type of things that we want to do with our data science department moving into the 2025 plan. Assuming that our budget is approved, we will have new positions to be able to do this type of work and really look at this at a detailed, detailed areas.
Okay, you answered my question, because I was going to ask, how are we monitoring that to make sure it's as up to date as possible. So you answered my question, so thank you for that. Just the last question that I have is, how in this plan are we going to ensure that upon embarking on a system like this and building a system like this, that we are including members of our region to be a part of that building process is an overall economic opportunity standpoint?
Councilmember Montgomery, that's a good question. Obviously the economic vitality and opportunities for local resident everywhere in the region is paramount of importance. As Ray will tell you that if COVID-19, as awful as it is, it highlighted some of the shortcomings of how our residents don't have equal access to economic opportunities, let alone transportation access. So we're gonna ensure, especially with local funding, all the aspects of labor that people didn't want to talk about in the past, whether it's, PLAs or prevailing wage, or how we do the hiring and how we move forward. Remember, transportation is an engine for the economy and creating jobs. Actually, we believe when this plan is implemented, it's going to create tens of thousands of jobs. Every billion invested, economists will estimate, and I'll let Ray correct me, create about 10,000 jobs. And hopefully these jobs will be good local, I don't know what happened here, I lost picture, good local jobs.
I can see you, Hassan.
Okay, all right, okay. Good local, good paying jobs. And equity is at the paramount to this. If we're gonna do shiny objects for some to benefit and not most people who didn't have access to benefits, not. So this is an important question, and I think you should hold the region leaders to that. And I'm gonna hold you to that to make sure that we as staff do our job.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. And I have no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Madam Clerk, anybody else?
Councilmember Zito, and Councilmember Zito will be followed by Vice Chair Campillo.
Thank you.
Oops. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ray and Colleen for the great presentation. Good to see you presenting financial information, Ray. I know that Hassan has been touting the wonderful merits of our finance committee, but they may have some competition coming up with the great job that you're doing too on presenting that information. So it's good to see. I did have a couple of questions, and before that, I did want to state that it's really great to see the plan taking shape. It's really an exciting plan, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity here to be going great places with where we're headed so far. But I was kind of curious, Hassan did bring up what COVID has shown, and I'm wondering if you could spend a little time talking about how that may or will be adjusting what you've put together so far, what we've learned from COVID. As an example, I think there is some opportunity here relative to the social equity aspects that have been discussed to perhaps focus in a little bit more on that, because with post-COVID world, I know the area that I'm involved with in the technology space, a lot of people won't be going back into the office full time. They'll be telecommuting 2 or 3 days a week. And yet there are other aspects of our society that can't do that. Their jobs require a physical presence. And is that going to change how we're potentially prioritizing investment and where we're looking at things first and things like that?
That's a great question. Thank you for allowing me to weigh in on this. This particular plan, the base year is done prior to COVID, okay? And we need to stick with that for the state of California. However, as soon as COVID happened and we saw that it was having some real impacts in the region, what we did is we immediately fielded a survey by a professional survey company, so not Sandag employees, but we went outside and we took a look at how employers and employees are not only handling COVID today, but for employers, we're asking what is the potential that you're going to be allowing your workers to work remotely. And we did this not only by industry, but we also did it by employment center, so that we started to understand, like Sorrento Valley, what's the impact going to be on Sorrento Valley for high tech, and what's going to be the difference in other places. And you're absolutely right. There's a marked difference between different types of jobs and whether or not people can actually do them remotely. And then there's also an acceptance by certain industries in terms of allowing people to telecommute. And so we have that information. We have the preliminary data has been analyzed, and that's one of the things that we're bringing to the board later in, it's later in like a month from now.
Back to them too.
And we'll bring it back to this committee also. So
Yeah.
that survey, we're meeting with the survey provider, the people compiling the data, and we're almost ready to put it into a report, and you'll be the first to hear about it. It's very fascinating. And so we will be taking that into account as we move forward, because one of the things that we were able to do from an analytical perspective is understand where people work within the region who have different types of jobs, right? So the irony here is that in Sorrento Valley, for instance, the people who have the lower paying jobs are actually commuting up from the South Bay. So they're still going to need to commute, because most of those jobs have to be physically done in the actual buildings, for instance. And so we're going to have this level of detail in about a month.
Great, I'm looking forward to it. I think that'll be very helpful to inform some of the comments that we're hearing so far. And in your presentation, Ray, you also mentioned about the increasing access to transit and alternative modes of communication and moving around. And I'm curious, that half-mile radius the access to the half-mile radius going up over the years. Do we know how much of that is being related to creation of more transit stops and more transit access versus trying to push more dense development around existing transit stops? Is that something that's available?
It's a combination of both, but it's primarily a more robust network that allows people to have transit stops close to their houses. I mean, one of the things that we did, I mean, it's an example with what used to be the purple line. The alignment of the purple line was on the 805 in every past plan. Nobody lives within a half a mile. Very few people live within a half mile exactly of a train station in the middle of 805. But if you move that alignment inland where the people actually are, you pick up a tremendous amount of people who could walk to a transit stop by just moving it off of the freeway. So, but then we have to put it underground. So these are all the things that we're looking at in the plan. But in order to optimize the system, what we had to do is to create a system where people would be close to where they want to get on and where they need to get off. And so that's the primary, but there is densification in there with the mobility hubs.
Okay, and I would just be interested to know, and it could be offline, what the ratio of that is, what our assumptions are.
I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can absolutely look at that. Yeah,
well, I can follow up you offline on that.
Okay, great.
And then relative to that, I assume our data viewer has been getting kept up to speed with the changes that are going on, although it's difficult for me to tell sometimes. But I am curious, I think it'd be very useful for the data viewer to identify entirely new things versus just enhancements of existing transit capabilities. So, there are certain things in there like I-15 or other areas that are fairly fully developed, but then being able to use a way to see what is new. And most importantly, what I think is going to be very helpful is to have an ability to identify where we're making or deviating significantly from our 2015 or Transnet plans, because what I want to avoid is, we do have some board members that are very passionate about certain things of what's been, committed to so far. And we need to get that discussion out sooner rather than later, saying, okay, this is the change. I look at it and I can see some of the changes that are, for example, proposed to I-5 in the Interstate 5 corridor versus what was committed to in Transnet. But I'm not looking at the whole county, and I just think we want to avoid those late surprises causing a lot of heated debate, and just say, is there a way to identify this is what we're going for that's going to change, and at the same time we can talk about why what we're going to now is so much better. But let's make sure we're having that conversation now instead of in August.
Duly noted. That is something that the data viewer can absolutely do. We just
Yeah.
need to make sure that it's set up to make it easy for people to look at those differences.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
You're-
And my last question was, I did notice on slide 46, when you're talking about the finances, the transit capital expenses are going way up, but the amount of money allocated for operations goes way down. Is there a reason that we're expecting, relative to the 2015 plan, operations to be so much more efficient in transit?
So that you are very studious there, Councilmember Zito. This is a really, it's a technical answer, but the time period between the 2015 plan and the horizon year of 2050 and the 2021 plan and the 2050 plan, it's fewer years of operations.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
Well,
that's
that makes entirely, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
that's why.
It leads to another question about our assumptions around other things, but I'll take some of that up offline. But
Okay, very
thanks
good.
for the question answers. Great stuff.
Thank you,
Are there any
Councilmember.
other?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, Vice Chair Campillo?
Thank you very much. And Hassan and Colleen and Ray and Phil, the entire Sandag team, really appreciate you walking me and Chair Vargas through this earlier this week in such detail, and for putting forward this transformational vision for our region. And as I expressed, I just have a few comments and then one question just to highlight certain things. And as I expressed at a committee meeting a few months ago, I really think that the mobility hubs, a very important detail, especially at the hub at Navoir site, must incorporate childcare as an essential amenity for the public. For the parents who might utilize mobility hub access the hubs to access transit, having a spot more easily to drop their children off at the same site or nearby, it was going to be critical to getting public buy-in. One of the biggest issues that I hear from my constituents is how difficult and how expensive childcare is, and partly because part of that is the transit and how much more extra time it creates. So I really hope that as we get deeper into the details, we'll really see that implemented. On top of the fact that having young residents be a part of that experience and normalizing public transit in San Diego, which I've seen in Boston and Brooklyn and in Los Angeles to a degree, is really a huge part of the public education and the normalization of it. And as the chair of Economic Development Committee here at the City of San Diego, that's a big priority of mine and my committee. And so we're going to be fully helpful in trying to implement that with Sandag as we move forward. Also, from that same perspective, the importance of improving our region's ability to move commercial goods. I think that as we compete against regions like LA, which for a century have beat us because of rail and because of the way they operate their port, Long Beach as well, being nearby, all these sorts of things. I know that improving our local transportation and implementing the 5 big moves could be more useful that. And I did notice that on one of your charts there, Ray, we saw an increase from nothing in the 2015 plan to transporting commercial goods. Could you expand on just a little bit on what that might look like, or what the essential, some of the details of that are going to be?
Sorry, could you clarify which slide?
When you showed the graph that had the bar, it was a bar chart of all the various components of the 2015 relative to the 2021 plan. I noticed that commercial goods had 0, and then now we have I think it was about $500 million going towards it.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah, that one.
I didn't have that one. That is largely focused on the third border crossing, because we have so much more information on that today, and we can dig into that a little bit deeper for you too, council member, and get some more information.
Wonderful. Okay, that's great. That money going there is critically important for South Bay international trade, just bringing good jobs. So I'm really glad to hear that. The other thing I wanted to point out, what I really like about this, and which I think is key to us selling the plan to the public, is how it takes into account the fact that housing and transit are integrally linked, and if only 3% of people take transit to work, it's because, as your graphs show, right, that people don't live close to transit and it's just easier for them to drive. But I think that each local jurisdiction, every member of this committee needs to go back to our city councils and our county board of supervisors. Chair Vargas, I know you're a strong proponent of this as well, but knowing that when we build the transit, we then open up the opportunities for building housing, the density bonus, the various financing plans that come along with being close to transit, make everything pencil out better. And so this plan helps us house our people closer to work and more cheaply so that they can afford all the other things their families need. So I think that that is a huge selling point for me in my district, and something that I'm going to continue to discuss out in public, because the construction of transit and transportation has to have a strong marriage with the construction of housing. And since people really think about housing affordability, homelessness, this plan helps us solve that other plan. And so I'm going to continue to be a champion for that. And I appreciate Mr. Okrata for all you do to bring that to the forefront as well. Last thing I wanted to point out is when looking at the plan, I know we connect SDSU and we connect UCSD to the plan, to the transit very closely, which is amazing. And I want to make sure we don't lose out on our community colleges. As I look through the plans, I know that we might have bus routes that go there, but noticing that Cuyamaca College out east, Grossmont College, which many of my constituents attend in the eastern part of San Diego, and then Southwestern Community College as well. Just making sure that we want to connect people to their jobs. And if we contemplate that students going to school is part of their job, they really need to be included on this. I know they haven't been left out, but I really want to make sure we give them a really solid, affordable, reliable option as part of the Big Five moves. And the educational institutions really have to be connected. I know you've thought about that, but I want to reiterate it as a key component of mine in supporting this plan. And so I really appreciate this. Last thing I'll say is on the equity piece, $160 billion being spent on this is, in my mind, not something that I look at and bat an eye at, because San Diego as a region is segregated in many, many ways. And this is us spending $160 billion to desegregate San Diego, putting people in contact with their jobs, creating more opportunities for affordable housing. All of that goes together. And so for the past 50 years, I think our planning hasn't taken into account how we can connect our communities and desegregate San Diego. This is us spending $160 billion to desegregate San Diego. That's another thing that my constituents really care about, something I really care about. And so I really appreciate Sandag staff for thinking of it in this way as well. So thank you very much for the presentation to me and Chair Vargas on Tuesday in person. And thank you for all you put forward today. I really, really look forward to implementing this plan with you into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have one more person, clerk.
Yes, Councilmember Edson.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to, of course, thank staff, Ray and Colleen, for the presentation. Nice job, well done. Lots of questions answered. It always leads to a few more questions. So a couple, the main one I had was that, Colleen, you mentioned free transit for low income and youth by 2035, which is a great goal. And, something that we've heard a lot of support for earlier today. But on slide 47, it talks about an increase on the bar chart in fare box recovery. So that's a little, I'm curious about that. I wondered if it was because with these moves, we have more frequency and reliability and competitive cost with comparison to cars. Is that the reason?
More people riding.
Okay, more ridership.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thank you for that. And Vice Chair Campillo, thank you for bringing up transportation to community colleges, because I agree that that's really important. I know our big universities are covered in these plans, but Miracosta and all of the other community colleges do need transit. That's all for me. Thanks.
Chair, that
All right.
concludes the comments, I believe.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Seeing no other member comments, I'm going to go over to item number 8, the North Coast Quarter Program. We're going to get a status update. I'm going to ask Mr. Alan Kosup to give us an update. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, other Transportation Council members. This is Alan Kosup. I'm the I-5 Corridor Director, North Coast Corridor Director, and wanted to provide an update on what we refer to as Build NCC, to talk about what we've done in the last quarter and what we're looking forward to in the remaining of this year. So next slide, please. So just as a reminder, when we talk about Build North Coast Corridor, really 4 major elements that we've been working on. We broke ground in 2017, and the 4 elements have a double track component in Cardiff, restoring the San Alejo Lagoon, a number of class 1 bikeways we're constructing, and then finally extending the carpool lane from Solana Beach into Carlsbad and finally ending at Route 78. Next slide. This is an $870 million package of improvements that we're working on right now that we're constructing. We've developed it, or delivering it in 6 different contracts, all within an umbrella with one contractor. It's under a CMGC contract with a contractor, FSSW. Major contractors, Flatiron, Skanska, Stacy Whitbeck. And as you can see, the advantage of delivering it in this way is we were able to, as items were ready to begin construction, we were able to start those first and get those open to the traveling public. And actually, 3 of the elements have been completed to date. And what we're working on remaining is extension of the carpool lanes. The program is on schedule, remains on schedule and within the original budget. Next slide. So in the last quarter, some major milestones, major accomplishments. Over the last 3 years, you've heard us talk about building the bridge at Manchester and the complications of the foundations and the large deep shafts that are being constructed. And those were the 270-foot deep foundations, 10-foot in diameter. The good news that we reported last quarter is those are complete. That was a major risk element on the project, and that's done. That allowed us to move above ground and start work on the bridge deck, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Another major accomplishment is the California Transportation Commission approved an additional $10 million of money, which allows us to begin construction on the final segment, extending the carpool lanes from Palomar Airport Road to Route 78. So the major accomplishments in the last quarter. And so next quarter, through the summer, it will break ground on that last piece that we were talking about in Carlsbad. And we'll also be transitioning the Manchester site, and you'll be able to start seeing that come alive in terms of what the final product will be. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. Next slide. And so this is the Manchester area, the San Alejo Lagoon. And I like this slide. This was taken last couple months ago while we were finishing the foundation work. And you can really see why this location is the linchpin for the whole project. It really is a bottleneck, not only for the freeway lanes, but also for the lagoon. You can see how the lagoon kind of crunch point there as it tries to get under the freeway. From an active transportation perspective, the linkage between Solana Beach and Encinitas, we didn't really have a linkage other than Coast Highway. This project allows us to address that. And so essentially, what you're looking at here, number 4 will build a new bike path between 5, which is going to be a park and ride with EV charging stations, also a community garden above the park and ride. Number 4 sort of builds a linkage between that location and the coast. Next slide. This is what it looks like today. And so you start seeing the bridge decks getting constructed now that the foundations and the columns are in place. What that allows us to do is once the bridge deck is complete, all the false work can start to be broken down and removed. And that work berm that you saw on the last slide, that dirt that was in the lagoon holding up the construction will be removed by summer. And that opens up the tidal flushing for the entire lagoon. Next slide. That's what it'll look like by the end of the year. Once we get the earth berm out of the way, we can start work on that new bike bridge, active transportation bridge, bike and pedestrians hanging bridge that will be underneath that freeway bridge, connecting the communities of Solana, or the cities of Solana Beach and Encinitas. So you kind of see it there. It's, you know, kind of small hanging in there, but by the end of the year, that will be in place. Next slide. Last time we here at TC, we talked about the public art that was getting installed in Encinitas. This is another example of aesthetic treatment that's coming online in the lagoon. So if you're in San Alejo looking at I-5, these wave patterns are now getting in place as part of the retaining walls. Next slide. Along Manchester, this is that number 4 that I was kind of showing, where we were connecting the new park and ride, the future park and ride, to the coast. This is what it looks like today. We are just now starting, in the last month, we're starting utility relocations. This is actually a fairly dense utility corridor, so that's sort of the first order of work. By the end of the year, next slide, this is what it'll look like along Manchester. So by the end of the year, the west side of the improvements will be complete. And then next slide. This is the east side of the freeway. This is what it looks like when you come through today. Up on the top there is a co-located facility with the owners' employees, as well as the contractors' employees. We'll be breaking that down by the end of summer, early fall of this year, so that we can start construction of the park and ride, as well as the community garden grading for the ultimate community gardens in here. So by the end of the year, this will start taking shape as well. Next slide. So that kind of focuses a little bit of what's happening at Manchester area. As you move north, construction continues on the outside widening. This will be the carpool lane that connects the Manchester area to Palomar Airport Road. And this is on track to be complete by the end of this year, open to traffic by the end of 21 to Palomar Airport Road. Next slide. We also broke ground last quarter on the noise walls, sound walls in the Carlsbad Encinitas area. This is about 4,200 linear feet of brand new sound walls. Next slide. So that's what's under construction now. Want to highlight what will be under construction in the summer, just in the next couple of months, which is that last piece between Palomar Airport Road and 78. As I mentioned, CTC voted the first $10 million just a couple of months ago. Next slide. We'll use a similar construction approach as we've done to the south, which is essentially begin work in the median. First order of work will be removing the oleanders in the existing rail, building that lanes, and then ultimately shifting to the outside by the end of this year. This segment should be in place and open to traffic by the end of 2022. Next slide. The challenge on this last piece has been, this actually represents a significant acceleration of funds as they were originally programmed with the state. We're trying to bring in about $113 million in at least 2 years. We have worked in a partnership, Caltrans, Sandag, and CTC, to try to find a way to do that. We've broken it up into 3 smaller elements and trying to vote it on an annual basis. The Commission has been very supportive of that. Also, as we look forward, we see a number of new opportunities, whether it be stimulus money or COVID money to make this happen. So we're very optimistic that this 3-step approach will be successful and will be, again, opened carpool lanes by the end of 22 all the way to 78, and then the remaining community enhancements will be done in early 23. Next slide. And I do want to sort of raise awareness as we begin construction on this last piece. So by summer, as I said, we'll start working the median. And one of the things we're going to talk about, we're going to do as a pilot, and Gustavo talked about the importance of safety and the problems we have with distracted drivers and people speeding through construction zones. And one of the ways that we're going to try to address this is by raising awareness that you're in a construction zone. And so we will be piloting orange stripe in the construction zone. And this is something that a few other states have tried very successfully. This will be the first place in California where we're using this. So we'll do a significant outreach program as we get closer to the date in the summer. Next slide. So that's it in closing. That kind of gives this quarter's update. It's an important year for us. I think we'll bring on a new elements that the customers can use. So we're really looking forward to 2021. Any questions?
Oh, thank you so much for your presentation, Alan. Are there any public comments on this item, Madam Clerk?
No, Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
All right, I'll turn it over. Any members of the committee have any comments on this item? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, Mr. Allen, for the presentation and for all the information. With that, our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 16th, 2021 at 9 a.m. I do want to thank all of the members of the Sandak team for doing such a wonderful job today, and Hassan for your leadership as well, and my colleagues for this. This was really a fruitful meeting. We got a lot of work done, and I feel like we're headed in the right direction. And so with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 11:46. Have a wonderful rest of the day and happy Easter for those that celebrate.
Thanks, everyone.